Welcome back, folks. This is our moment in history. What great Western leader possibly could be blamed for the chaos in the Middle East? And you say?
A man that I admire tremendously is one of the greatest men of the last century.
Thank you very much.
Quite welcome. Winston Spencer Churchill will always be known as the man that saved England and used it as a basic launching point to finally put an end to Hitler and his murderous crew. Unfortunately, he made a lot of mistakes in his life, and one of them was as colonial minister of the British. He says, I will never preside over the destruction of the British Empire. And he wanted, when the Turks, who were part of the Central Powers of Italy, Germany, and Turkey, Wilson, who was in charge of the Versailles Treaty, didn't want to bother with the Middle East. So Churchill, Lloyd George, who was Prime Minister, then eventually turned it over to Churchill, the colonial secretary, and he said, let's be sure we keep our influence going in the Middle East. And they had a bunch of people that they knew they could depend on, like Emir Abdullah and King Faisal. The trouble is all those guys wanted different spots. So finally, they had to carve out Jordan from the West Bank and East Bank of the Jordan that was supposed to go to the Jewish people as a homeland. So they carved out Jordan, which nobody ever had heard of, and consequently put the Emir Abdullah in charge of that because he couldn't get the job in Baghdad. So it turns out they made phony countries all over the Middle East. Saudi Arabia were just a bunch of Bedouins riding their camels back and forth. So the whole thing was never, once the Ottoman Empire was finished after a few hundred years, it was left to be decided supposedly by somebody, and that somebody was Churchill, and Churchill wanted to be sure this would become strictly an abstract addition to the British Empire.
But why do you say that he is responsible for the mess that we're in today?
Well, because it never allowed a development of organizational strength, civilized strength, if there could be in that part of the world. It was a phony deal that was manipulated, and then when oil became the big discovery in the 1920s, they had the Aramco thing where everybody did it based on how much money they could put in for the oil. It became strictly based on oil. So the basic Shia Sunni confrontation was always in the background, because under the Turks all these things were submerged because the Turks didn't fool around. You know, the Turks murdered 1.5 million Armenians. They would have had and probably murdered a lot of people in that.
And why is that so difficult for the Americans to admit that or to talk about that? Because there was an anniversary recently of that massacre.
Yes.
And the president would not acknowledge it, and it got a lot of people upset.
Well, that's because that we did want to offend.
He's buddies with Erdogan?
Yeah, exactly. Because Erdogan had said that it never happened, that there was fortunes of war.
Well, that's like the Ayatollahs say that the Holocaust never happened as well.
Well, very much like it. If it hadn't been for the Jews themselves and their ability to communicate this, and then having the Eichmann trial, you know, the kidnapping by the Israeli intelligence, bringing him in and having the trial, that put a lot of people, and then of course they got all the old movies and pictures and things.
But do you think that if the Middle East was split up differently, that we wouldn't be seeing what we're seeing today? Because I think that you go back to the beginning of time and these people were fighting each other.
Well, it's a good point. I'm saying is, I don't know. I'd say chances are we had the worst situation that possibly could happen. Who knows?
Monday Morning Quarterback. That wraps up another edition of The World Report. If you want to see the show again or just catch a segment, the easiest way is just go to our website, theworldreport.org. For Maury Beschloss and all those exceptional folks in the United States Armed Forces, police, firefighters, and all those who get up each and every day to keep us safe, I'm Scott Crowfoot. God willing,